Chapter 144, Horrifying Realization 1. Wait. Staring at the recording in front of me, I didn't know how to react. What did I just witness? My eyes weren't deceiving me, right? This was, without a doubt, the Twisted Man. Staring at the horrifying figure that still haunted me in my sleep at times, I found myself swallowing nervously. From the all-too-familiar top hat to the suit and its long and lanky body that I could never forget about. Yes, there's no mistaking it. It really is the Twisted Man. I replayed the scene from the video in my mind, my heart lodged in my throat as a slow, creeping realization began to take hold. The Twisted Man. It was a man-made anomaly. Something like this was possible. Staring at the white-garbed figures that were present within the tape, I found the sense of unease grow. This especially grew more pronounced when my eyes fell on a certain figure within the circle. It was clear the figure was a woman, and remembering the previous tape, I recalled how the man inside the circle had been desperately staring toward her. It didn't take a genius to understand what had happened. That woman and the man know each other. Most likely, the woman had some sort of involvement in how he found himself there, which in turn resulted in him becoming the Twisted Man. If I had to guess who the woman was, it would almost certainly be the old woman. Thinking back to her words about her husband, how he never returned after that trip, and realizing that the very man trapped within the circle was him, I knew without a shadow of a doubt that my theory was correct. But that still raised a few questions. Who are the people in white? Are they, possibly related to the same cult that I'm thinking of? It's obvious the old lady is affiliated with them, and they are the ones behind the Twisted Man. But, what is their goal? And what about her second husband? How was he related to all of this? Could it be that he had also been turned into? My thoughts paused there. Suddenly, taking out my phone and opening up the file related to the Twisted Man, my eyes paused on the number of incidents that the guild suspected were all related. In total, there were 7 incidents. Each on different island, with the case being the exact same each time. Single 2-story house. Attack when there's only one person. Most attacks occur on the 2nd floor. As I read the words carefully and took in the situation, a tangle of thoughts swirled through my mind, but gradually, as I recalled everything I had experienced lately, the once scattered pieces began to fall into place. Right, why didn't I think about it before? It came as like a sort of eureka moment. I thought about the layout of each house and the victims. Single 2-story house with a single person. What other place was like that? It was the old woman's house. Even if the old woman and the people she's working with have full control of the anomaly, what they don't have full control of is the hatred it has towards the one responsible for its creation. What if the reason why it haunts people with such criteria is because it's trying to display the resentment it has for the old woman? Whoever the victims were, the Twisted Man killed them with the thought of killing the woman. While I was still unsure about the reason for the poem and why the Twisted Man loved to play, I was certain that I was headed in the right direction with my thoughts. Yes, it all makes sense. As more and more dots started to connect with one another, there was still one question that lingered at the back of my mind. The second husband. What exactly happened to the second husband? Did he meet the same fate as the first husband? In that case, my thoughts paused as a horrifying theory struck me. There were 2 twisted men. The thought of another Twisted Man lurking around somewhere made me grow tense, but that was only for a brief moment, as I suddenly looked back towards the information within my phone, and my eyes paused on the number of cases. 7 cases, 7 different islands. Covering my mouth, I shook my head. No, I'm overthinking. It's probably the Twisted Man moving between the islands. There's no way. There's absolutely no way that there existed 7 twisted men. Absolutely no way. Flick. Jolting me out of my thoughts was the sound of the television closing as the room suddenly plunged into darkness. But not for long, as a dim light cast right behind me, illuminating the area in front of me faintly. My entire body locked in place as the light swayed slowly to the right, then to the left. I watched, paralyzed, as my shadow shifted with it, along with the shape of a head leaning out just above my right shoulder. So, I nearly jumped out of my skin, every nerve screaming, but somehow I kept silent barely. My breath caught as I slowly turned my head, dread crawling up my spine. A pair of hollow, empty eyes stared straight into mine. So, The sound nearly slipped from my mouth, but I just barely kept myself from muttering them. I staggered back, every inch of my body trembling as a cold shiver gripped my bones and my thoughts became a jumbled mess. But then a voice echoed. It was a hoarse, grainy rasp that seemed to drag itself across the walls, almost as if someone was scraping them with long and sharp nails. "So you managed to find this place?" She lifted her thin hand and held the lamp out in front of her, its dim glow revealing the lines and creases of her aged face as she peered at me from behind the light. "I did suspect that you might find this place, but I didn't think you'd actually be able to. I'm starting to grow curious." Her head cocked slightly. "How did you manage to find this place?" Silence filled the room shortly after her words echoed. The thought of answering her never crossed my mind. I knew all too well that this could very well be a trap to get me to speak. If the twisted man is indeed here, then all it will take is one single word for me to meet my end. I'm not going to fall for it. You're not much of a speaker, are you?" Her lips slowly curled into a smile, but it was then that I noticed her mouth was completely devoid of teeth. "Well, it is of no issue." The old woman's attention turned towards the marking on the floor as she tapped her foot lightly. "Now that you're here, you might as well become the very same thing my previous husbands became." The markings on the floor suddenly pulsed, and I felt a sudden change in my surroundings. Whatever the changes were, I didn't plan on sticking for long as I made a move for the gap between the old woman and the house door, but tonk! My nose smashed against something hard the moment I tried to move away, forcing me back as I stared at the empty space before me. Suddenly recalling the video from before, I reached my hand forward. It was there that I felt a smooth and durable surface. What in the world was this? What's happening? Why can't I move forward? Pressing my hand forward and feeling the smooth yet invisible surface before me, my thoughts momentarily paused. I didn't know what was happening, nor did I have an idea of what this strange, invisible surface in front of me was. The only thing I knew was that things were unfolding the same exact way as they did on the tape. Still, as I lifted my gaze toward the old woman ahead, a cold understanding crept in. I already knew she wasn't normal. This had to be her doing, a skill of hers that blocks anyone from leaving. There is no use trying to escape. The old woman's voice whispered in the air once more as the metal lamp in her hand dangled before her, causing the shadows all over to stretch and shrink in repeated patterns. "You're already trapped here. There's no point in trying to escape." What followed her words was the brightening of the circle that stood beneath me, illuminating my surroundings as it suddenly grew warmer, and I started to sweat all over. I also started to feel itchy all of a sudden. Shit. I'd seen the video, I knew what came next. My stomach filled with dread as I stared at the old lady who stood on the opposite end. My stomach twisted as I locked eyes with the old woman, her face contorted as she began to hum in a strange, broken rhythm. Her words made no sense, yet each syllable scraped against my spine like nails. Sol ta alhim orik sun. The temperature grew warmer, more sweat formed, and the itch grew more and more persistent. I need to quickly leave this place. Bangs bang. I tried banging on the surface in front of me, but as though it were made of some sort of extremely durable material, it didn't budge at all. Stop resisting, child. She paused her chant, staring at me. To reject me is to reject the mist, and no one rejects the mist. It sees everything, it feels everything, and it hears everything. Whatever thoughts you have, it knows. What is she talking about? Listening to her words, I struggled to grasp what she was trying to say. It appeared to be something about the mist, but what mist? Was she talking about the strange mist that dotted the sky and surrounded the islands, or was she talking about something else? It's very likely that she's talking about the mist that surrounds the islands, but from the way she's speaking, it almost feels like she thinks of it as a real living entity. Could it be? Thinking about it, there were all sorts of anomalies in this world. It wouldn't be a surprise to me if the mist was actually a byproduct of an anomaly or an anomaly itself. However, with all of my past research, I had never found anything of the sort in the past. Could it be that it was some sort of secret information? Could also be that she's batshit crazy. Looking at her, this seemed to be the most probable thought. To reject me is to reject the mist, and no one rejects the mist. It sees, it feels, it hears, whatever you think it knows. I thought back to the recording and thought about the people in white. Could she be referring to them? If so, was this some sort of strange cult that worshipped the mist? Is there any correlation between this and the cult that was planning on sacrificing Mile? I felt extremely inclined to believe that this was the case, but I knew too little about the cult that I was dealing with to know. And what if it is, what then? I thought about how I had gotten involved with them due to Mile, and a cold dread settled in my chest. The pooling sweat around my shirt wasn't helping as the temperature was rising fast. I understood that the situation was rapidly deteriorating. If I didn't get out soon, then there was a very likely chance that I'd never be able to get out. Thankfully, I was prepared. Staring at the old woman, a long and thin figure appeared right behind her, looming over her without her knowing. Or at least that's how it seemed at first, until the woman's lips curled into an eerie smile. Something moved. From the wall, a shape peeled away like flesh from bone. First came the tall, black-top hat, then the sleek contours of a suit I knew too well. Every inch of the figure exuded a silent malice, one that felt extremely sinister. But its sudden presence didn't scare me. Rather, it made me feel a lot more at ease. Knowing that a twisted man was present was a lot less scary than not knowing if it was present or not. With its appearance, I now knew, and I felt a little relieved to some extent. I also secretly rejoiced at my caution. Had I said a single word, I would have most likely been killed. No, wait. I blinked my eyes slowly, realizing something. The old woman, it was quite clear that she didn't want to kill me. Her goal was something else, something more obvious. Staring at that red circle that pulsed beneath me and thinking back to the video, the answer was obvious. The old woman wanted to turn me into a twisted man. I didn't have much time to think. The moment the twisted man appeared, I immediately started to act, grabbing the knife from my bag while at the same time, a viscous substance filled my hand as it converted into a hammer that I drummed onto the invisible wall. Bangs, bang. The twisted man was attracted to noise. So long as I brought it to me, then it would leave the dreamwalker alone. And indeed, my thoughts were quickly proven correct, as the twisted man turned its attention towards me, taking a step forward as its twisted smile curved further. Seeing this, the old woman didn't react. She simply smiled as the dreamwalker attacked her from behind. Everything happened incredibly quickly. It all happened in the time that it took for me to breathe, and right as the dreamwalker's attack was about to reach the old woman, her face twisted as she turned around and shone the lamp directly in front of the dreamwalker as it stopped dead in its tracks. A dreamwalker, how peculiar. She looked more amused than anything else as she reached her sickly hand forward and grabbed onto the neck of the dreamwalker. While I'm confused as to how a dreamwalker is following you, it has been getting in my way since before. I think it's time that I got rid of it. No shit, I can't let it die like this. Its loyalty had already fallen quite a bit for what I had done to it before. I couldn't afford to make it fall again. That was why I didn't hesitate to bring out Mile. A sudden giggling sound echoed throughout the room the moment I brought out Mile, causing everything to pause as the old woman similarly stopped, her head turning towards the direction from which the noise came as a little head peeked from right behind the window. The moment Mile appeared, it was as if time had frozen completely. Everything seemed to come to a standstill as the twisted man and the old lady both stopped, staring in the direction of the little girl. I thought that this was a good enough distraction for me to leave, but right as I was about to think of a way to get out, the old lady's voice echoed in the air once more. Smile. And when I looked at her, she was no longer smiling. She was trembling. And so was I. What did she just say? Did she just say Mile? I had to take a moment to fully digest the situation, my thoughts squirming as I connected even more dots. However, I was quick to snap out of it and stared at the space in front of me. Even though I was curious about the situation, there were more pressing matters at hand. Like getting out of this darn place. With the old lady distracted by Mile's appearance, I knew that this was the perfect opportunity for me to figure something out and escape. I would have loved for Mile to directly attack her, but as of right now, Mile wasn't capable of doing anything but causing a distraction. Although Mile was an extremely strong anomaly, my current capabilities were clearly not enough to make use of her full abilities. Even her skill was currently marked with question marks. Catching sight of the woman staring blankly toward Mile, I turned to the twisted man, who was also drawn to Mile's giggling. Even if I can use Mile's skill, there's no way that she can defeat the twisted man. For the old woman, I don't think she's much stronger than me. The issue was that she could control the twisted man. That was the most troublesome thing. So long as she could control the twisted man, it would be impossible for me to leave this place. I've already found everything that I need. I'm sure the quest is already completed. The thing I need to figure out now is how to leave. This was still considered a second-order mission. At least I hoped. Whether it was or not, I wasn't sure, especially when I came to the realization that the strange cult behind Mile had a hand in this matter. But now was not the time for me to dwell on those matters. I need to think. How in the world can I get rid of the twisted man and the old woman? No, not even the twisted man, the old woman. If the old woman was the one who was controlling the twisted man, then she was my target. She was the one that I needed to handle somewhat in order to escape. All sorts of thoughts and ideas jumbled up in my mind as I thought of all sorts of scenarios. This all happened in the span of less than a few seconds, and when the old woman spoke again, she redirected her gaze towards me. Why is Mile here? How is she here? Her eyes were wide as she looked at me. Bloodshot even. For some reason, she almost looked desperate to the point where I could feel the circle beneath me starting to falter. Wait, this can be an opportunity. Her actions sparked an idea as I looked from the old woman back to Mile. I quickly recalled Mile, then summoned her again. She clung to my right leg, peeking out from behind it to stare at the old woman. Mile, it's really her. The old woman's eyes shook the moment she saw Mile. This also confirmed my thoughts about her and the cult. Without a doubt, she belonged to the same cult that had involved Mile. It was already quite obvious before, but this eliminated all shred of doubt. How is Mile with you? With the old woman asking again, I felt shivers run down my spine when I felt her gaze. It felt more bloodthirsty. More desperate. There was something sinister in her eyes now, filling the hollowness that once filled them. Why aren't you answering me? Her voice grew even more hoarse as she spoke, her eyes fixated on me. I could see the impatience starting to build up as she looked at me. Just as she was about to act, I raised my hand and pointed to my mouth. Keeping my eyes fixed on the twisted man. Who? Pausing, the old woman alternated her gaze between me and the twisted man before she spoke once more. It won't attack you, there's no need to worry, you can speak freely. I shook my head. Although I did believe her words, the point of the matter was that I wanted the twisted man as far away as possible from me. It was only once it was gone that I could think of escaping this place. I said, you can speak. The old woman raised her voice turning even more hoarse as her wrinkles became more pronounced under the dim light of her lamp. I stood firm. As of right now, I held the advantage. She wanted information from me, and in order to get it, she had to listen to my requests. I once again pointed at the twisted man. Get rid of it, or I'm not going to speak. Although I didn't directly say the words, it felt as though she understood them as her face twisted and contorted. The red circle beneath me also glowed a stronger pulse, and staring at it, I felt my stomach churn. Ah yes, nothing strange here. Even though the red circle beneath me felt threatening, with the heat starting to become unbearable, I didn't let it affect me. I hold the advantage in the situation. She wants information. She also probably wants Mile, in that case. I looked at Mile and unsummoned her. Mile? The old woman grew frantic as she saw Mile disappear before she flicked her attention back towards me. What did you do? Bring Mile back. Brings her back. The old woman's voice strained further as she started to scream for Mile, but I ignored her while continuously staring at the twisted man. I needed to make sure that she got my intentions. And I didn't have to wait for long. I'll get rid of it. With a wave of her hand, the twisted man began to move, turning towards the stairs that led to the second floor before disappearing right before my very eyes. The wooden stairs creaked under its steps, and I knew that it had truly gone up. But still, I didn't relax. There's also a chance that there might be another one. It's gone, speak now, tell me how you got Mile, no, let me see her. The old woman stepped forward, moving towards me, but stopped the moment she felt the barrier in front of me. When I saw her stop, I quickly summoned Mile as she once again hugged my thigh. This time her little mouth parted open as she mumbled, I don't like this, I don't like this. Staring at the old woman, Mile didn't look happy at all. I could understand why. If the old woman was truly related to the cult, then there was no way she'd be happy with her here. But I needed her to play along for just a little bit. Just a little. Turning towards Mile, I patted her back while nudging with my chin towards the old lady. Understanding my intentions, Mile made a face, but eventually stopped hugging my leg as she moved closer towards the old lady. Mile. Seeing Mile, the old lady grew even more frantic, as her hands pressed against the invisible barrier before her. Mile, come here to me. No. Mile shook her head, taking a step back while staring at her. You come to me. She also began to sulk while staring at the old lady. My entire body tensed at the sight, my hands slowly curling as I waited patiently. And then, come, yes, of course I'll come. Taking a step forward, the red circle beneath began to falter, and soon it dimmed down completely as the old woman crossed the circle and headed towards Mile. Yes, it's you, Mile, I know it's you. It was also in that moment that I moved, a viscous black liquid coating my entire hand as I lunged at the old lady in a desperate attempt to take her down. It was now or never. Very clearly, Mile was incredibly important to the old lady. Perhaps not even the old lady, but whatever cult she belonged to. In fact, thinking back to what I had managed to gather, it appeared to be the cult leader who was interested in Mile. Something about needing her to help them advance. The old lady's reaction was all that I needed to see to confirm such thoughts. Seeing how she followed all of my instructions, and even went as far as cancelling whatever rite she was trying to perform, I understood just how important Mile was to her and the cult. I took advantage of that. The strange barrier in front of me vanished in an instant. Without hesitation, I lunged straight at the old woman instead of running away. It's you! The old lady's face contorted and twisted the moment she saw me lunge in her direction, but I didn't care and immediately lashed down with my hand as the dreamwalker in her grasp squirmed and made things more difficult for her. My first thought before had been to find this chance to run away. However, I realized that it would probably lead to another chase. Not only that, if there was a possibility of another twisted man lurking around somewhere, I knew that I'd be doomed. That was why I decided to go directly to the old lady. Not only could she control the twisted men, but she also had valuable information about the strange cult. If I could just take care of her, then I'd be able to learn more about the cult, while at the same time escape this entire scenario. I've also felt her strength. Besides the fact that she can control the twisted man, she isn't very strong. The plan was solid and I was quick to act. Everything was perfect, from the timing of my actions to the clear startled look on the old lady's face. But, thump. Right as I began to move, I heard the sudden sound of something rapidly approaching from the stairs, and my heart nearly leaped out of my chest as I caught a glimpse of a large shadow appearing from the side of the stairs as it directly headed my way. It was fast. Incredibly fast. I knew in that moment that the twisted man was coming, but instead of panicking, I continued with my actions, hammering down at the old lady as she raised both hands to block the attack. Bang! The attack hit and she stumbled back. As she did, the twisted man's figure became even clearer in the background as its head turned to stare in my direction, sending chills down my entire body. Now, a long shadow appeared behind the old lady right as she stumbled back, grasping her arms. Elle let go. Clearly, although she wasn't as strong as the twisted man, she was still quite strong, as she nearly managed to escape the grasp of the dreamwalker. But it was still not enough as I immediately rushed ahead and extended my hand as a long tip formed, stopping right at the old woman's neck. I froze in place, the world around me stilling as my eyes slowly rose to meet the massive figure looming behind the old woman. Its crooked grin revealed jagged teeth, and the shadow cast by its large top hat masked much of its face, making it all the more sinister. Its presence alone made me shiver. It almost felt as though a massive boulder had been placed over my shoulders, causing them to bend slightly as I tried my best to maintain my composure. But it was hard to do so. Staring at the end tip of the black substance that stopped right at the old lady's neck, I opened my mouth, feeling the slight sting that came from my dry lips separating for the first time in a while. Tell it to move back, or you'll die. Bass thump, bass thump. The moment I spoke, I felt my own heart rate spike up to an unimaginable rate as I stared at the twisted man. I was tense, incredibly so, as I forgot to breathe for a moment. Will it act, or will it not? I waited for what felt like forever, but, thankfully, the twisted man didn't move at all. It was almost as if it didn't care about my voice, as it continued to keep its gaze on me, waiting for some sort of command. That was when I knew that my plan had worked. As expected, it won't move now that the old lady is in danger. This was indeed the key to getting out. I could now also speak without worrying about the twisted man, as I stared at the old lady in front of me. For the first time in a while, I finally found myself relaxing a little. Shall we have a talk, the two of us? At the same time. It was still quite early in the morning. About 3 a.m. usually at this time, most people were asleep, even those from the guild. Most monsters came from gates, and unless an emergency situation occurred, there was no need for them to do anything. The only department that needed to be alert at night was the containment department. Unlike the other departments, anomalies acted in the middle of the night more often than not. But with that being said, not many stayed in the office during nighttime. They were usually all sent towards areas where the anomalies were reported. Currently, the section chief's office. Oh dear. Staring at the numerous paperwork piled up in front of him, the section chief scratched the back of his head. Beside him stood a woman with short black hair that brushed her shoulders. A look of pity softened her features as she glanced at the section chief, gently resting her hand on his shoulder. With a good salary comes a lot of work. The section chief didn't even feel like replying at all. No, he did actually. Yes, and also a great assistant, don't you think, team leader Soren? Huh. The woman's face changed the moment she felt the section chief's gaze. Her brows furrowed as she took a step back. Hold on, don't tell me you actually think I will help you with this. The section chief smiled, and the team leader's face crumbled as she immediately turned around to face the door. Where do you think you're going? Leaving? No shit, I don't get paid enough for this. No, you're staying. The section chief forced her to sit on one of the sofas despite her protests that went on like, it's the middle of the night. Why am I still supposed to work? What sort of slavery is this? He ignored her and sat down at his desk. But just as he did, he heard her groan again. Lifting his head to stare at the team leader, she slumped the papers on the table before looking at him. This is ridiculous. Why am I the only one getting called to do this? I'm sure the other team leaders are also available. They aren't. But they're supervising the members, alongside the exchange members from the other departments, a role that you yourself managed to slip away from. To his words, the team leader could only remain quiet. She was just about to prepare a response when the section chief spoke again. I've also received several reports from Kyle and Zoe about you throwing all your responsibilities to them. What? Team leader Soren nearly jumped up from shock. Those rats did what? Catching her slip up, the team leader immediately covered her mouth, but it was too late as the section chief heard her and shook his head. For someone as capable as her, she really was extremely lazy. And it was because of how she was that the section chief found himself acting differently around her. Get to work. Shaking his head, he pointed at the papers in front of her. The faster we get this done, the quicker we can go H. The section chief barely managed to get a few words out before his phone rang. Frowning, he looked at it to check who was contacting him at this hour, before his brows jumped up. Well, fine, I'll do the paperwork for now. Can you tell me where? Scratch that. The section chief strode toward the hangar at the far end of the room, grabbed his coat and top hat, quickly donned them, and hurried toward the door. Do this all yourself, I need to go. Clank. He left right after that, leaving the team leader at a complete loss. By the time she snapped out of it, he was already gone. A look of despair marred her features. Wait, section chief. Staring at the old woman, I was nervous. Extremely nervous. Even though I was currently the one who held the advantage, as the pointed tip of my hand was placed right at her neck, the looming figure that stood before me made my heart grow extremely heavy. But despite this, I remained steady. These next few moments were key for me to leave and learn more information about the entire situation. I pressed the tip closer to her throat. However, despite the fact that I was pressing the sharp tip closer to her throat, the old lady didn't look scared at all. In fact, she didn't look like she felt much at all. Her hollow eyes remained fixed on me as her lips parted. Miles, how did you have her? She asked the same question, her eyes growing even more hollow as she did. Answer me. The twisted man behind her twitched, and for a brief moment I almost faltered, but I kept my cool and kept my hand raised to her throat. Even as the twisted man began to move, its body stretching over me, I remained still. This was a game of nerves. It was to see who would falter first. But there was something that the old lady didn't take into account. And that was the fact that even if I removed my hand and ran away, the twisted man would still get me. It had already heard my voice. For that reason, I remained still. I knew and understood that the twisted man wasn't going to move. So even as the floor cracked and the twisted man moved around me, I didn't budge at all. Credark. Staring directly into the hollow eyes of the old woman, while feeling the floor behind me sink as a shadow cast over me, I licked my lips. Calm down, I need to remain calm. I couldn't panic, I couldn't allow myself to panic. Keeping my gaze fixed on the old woman in front of me, I began to speak again. So who are you, what is your goal, and what do you want with Mile? The old woman blinked the moment I asked the question. She seemed genuinely surprised at first, but soon her lips cracked into a sick and twisted smile. So you don't know? Her tone was laced with amusement as she looked at me. Despite being here, despite having Mile with you, you don't know, ka. A growly, slow laugh escaped the old woman's lips as her empty eyes stared directly at me, and the twisted man stopped, its head moving right next to mine as shivers ran down the right side of my neck. Eventually, the head stopped before it turned to face me, exposing its twisted smile. I wanted to run in that moment. I really want to run. But I couldn't falter, and I pressed my hand deeper into the woman's neck. Answer me. Please, Kek. The old woman cracked a laugh yet again, extremely amused by my reactions. I was just about to push the tip further down her neck when her dry lips parted open. We follow the doctrine of the mist. What? The woman's smile grew even more twisted as she noticed my confusion. Do you think that the mist that covers the world is a natural phenomenon? Do you think the reason why floating islands exist is because the land beneath is simply uninhabitable? Kak. Cracking another laugh, the old woman's eyes grew more deranged. It is not a natural phenomenon. Kakak, everything, all of it is the will of the architect. Architect. He knows it all, he is aware of it all. He is the savior that will save us from this cursed world. The woman's head twitched in that moment, producing a faint cracking sound as I was taken aback. Savior of what? This felt like some sort of thing some lunatic would say. Well, she is a lunatic. He is the reason I've been able to live for so long despite my condition. They all told me that I wouldn't be able to live further than 20, but look at me now. The old woman opened her mouth. I've grown old enough to lose my teeth. Ka. The woman cracked another smile, exposing her empty mouth. Something about the old woman's demeanor felt off to me, but at the same time, taking in the information, a theory occurred to me. Could it be that she had some sort of incurable disease that she couldn't cure, and this, whatever architect or cult, somehow managed to cure her from the disease? As a result, she decided to become a devout believer in them. This made sense. If I had to start a cult and had the ability to heal people from strange diseases, I'd do the same thing. It was the fastest way to gain followers. I think I'm starting to get a better idea of how this strange cult works. I'm curious about the mist and what they mean by that, but looking at her, I don't think she'll elaborate. I could only keep her with me at the moment and bring her back to the guild. No, wait, I couldn't quite do that. She was aware of Mile and the Dreamwalker. I couldn't afford to expose them, as that would also expose my secret. Ah shit, if that's the case, what am I supposed to do with this old woman? Staring at her, a thought crossed my mind. And the thought was, to kill her. I licked my lips, my hand trembling slightly. I didn't pity the woman even if she died. In fact, she deserved death. I didn't think I'd even feel much from killing her. But it was just that. I had never killed anyone before. The thought of killing someone also felt a little daunting, but if it needed to be done, I was prepared to do so. I'll probably end up puking after a while, but I'm already used to puking. I licked my lips again, feeling my mouth growing even drier than before. Regardless of how I see things, I can't let her leave. She knows too much, and bringing her back to the guild is also not an option. Do I really have no other choice but to kill her? The more I dwelled on the situation, the more this seemed to be the correct course of action, and my stomach churned even further. However, I knew that I couldn't waste time. Seeing how the woman was just laughing, no longer answering any of my questions, I knew that it was time for me to end things. But not quite yet. Feeling the presence of the twisted man, I knew that it would still be here even if she ended up dying. I couldn't kill her just yet. I need to do it after getting out of this place. With my thoughts organized, I was just about to open my mouth when the woman's voice echoed in the air once more. You also look sick. Ugh, what did she just say? Looking down on her, I saw her stare at me with a flat expression. No longer was she laughing or smiling like before. Instead, her face looked serious. Chillingly so. Zla. Then, as if realization had suddenly struck her, the smile returned to her face. It's no wonder, it's no wonder. What, WH? I can feel it. The old woman cut through my words, her smile twisting in amusement. You have a cognitive shard, just like me. What did she just say? Hearing her sudden words, my entire body stiffened. Cognitive shard, cognitive shard, cognitive shard. The words played on repeat inside my mind. It replayed over and over again as I thought about the two words that I hadn't heard in a long time, but had been trying to figure out how to cure. As far as I knew, there was no cure for it. The only cure was the strange system that I had. And yet, this woman in front of me was telling me that she had the same disease as me. That she managed to live for so long despite having the same disease. I couldn't understand it. Had I been lied to the entire time? Was there really no cure like those from the guild suggested? Was the strange system really the only place that could cure me from this disease of mine? No, most importantly, how could she even tell? None of the people I had met had noticed anything, be it the section chief, the team leaders, and even Kyle. How did she notice it so quickly? You should look at your expression. The woman's smile widened as she looked at me. She seemed to relish in my internal turmoil. You've probably been told so many times how there is no way to cure your disease, how you're just going to die away without being able to fight it. I bet that's all you heard your entire life. It was. It really was. But back then, my circumstances were different. No one knew what the strange disease that was eating at me was. All the doctors that I had somehow managed to visit came back with the same answer. My mind was deteriorating, but there was nothing wrong with my brain. It was only once I came to this strange world that I came to learn about the identity of the disease that had been plaguing me for so long. Cognitive shard. I had a cognitive shard. But it was also the moment that I understood what my disease was that I found myself becoming lost. As far as I understood, cognitive shards came from the overfragmentation of the nodes within one's body. I had no nodes. In fact, there was no such thing as nodes in my previous world. Anomalies were also not a thing. they were more like fiction than anything else. And yet, somehow, someway, I had a cognitive shard. How did this make sense? It didn't make sense at all. There were so many questions regarding my current situation that I desperately wanted to see the answer to. But more than anything, I wanted to be cured. I wanted to be free for once in my life. I didn't want to wake up thinking that this very day could be my last. I wanted to wake up knowing that this day, it was a day that I could look forward to. You look hesitant. I hit right in the nail, didn't I? The old woman continued to speak, my pressure over her neck weakening slightly as she appeared to notice this. I can see that you're desperately looking for a cure to your disease. I can provide that for you. I can cure you. Her words were like a whisper of temptation. Listening to her words, voices began to whisper in my mind. Listen to her. Take the cure. She's the living example that the cure works. You don't even know the real intention of the system. Isn't it easier to listen to her? For a moment, I faltered. For the briefest of moments, I actually considered the notion of turning to the cult. But it was only for a brief moment. What do you say if you let me go? No. I cut the woman off, whipping the smile from her face at the same time as her face slowly started to change. It slowly became emotionless. Her eyes became more hollow, and just one look at her was enough to give me chills. Are you sure? Yes. There was no hesitation on my end. I knew very well that even if I wanted to take the offer, the system would probably not allow me to do it. Not only that, but I'd also be forced to do all sorts of things for the guild. I already had the system with me. And not only that, it also helped me develop games. That was all that I wanted to do. I was, after all, a horror game developer. Joining some sort of strange cult I had no idea about was not something I was entirely inclined to do. I wanted to traumatize people in a different way, a more ethical way. You're going to regret this decision. Perhaps I will. With my hands still pressed against her throat, I moved a little to the side and physically turned her body around before grabbing the back of her neck. At the same time that I acted, the twisted man beside me moved, its movements following me as it tried to reach for me, but stopped the moment I applied more force onto the woman's neck. Yes, as expected, it won't move as long as I can threaten her life. Go, walk ahead. I pushed her with my hand, leading her towards the door of the house, as the woman followed along with my instructions without saying a single word. But just as we moved, I stopped and looked back. Keep the thing here, I'll kill you if it follows me. You'll die if you kill me. I know, so let's keep it civil between us. I smiled docilely at her. She didn't answer, nor did I care to hear her answer as I led her out of the house. At the same time, I looked back towards the twisted man as it stood by the door, staring in our direction without moving a single muscle. It just stood there, staring at us without any trace of emotion. I tore my gaze away after a few uneasy moments, gesturing for the old woman to move ahead. We began walking across the empty streets of the city, where the street lamps flickered like dying embers under the weight of the darkness. Each of our footsteps rang out loudly, swallowed and then spat back by the silence, as if something was listening just beyond the edge of the light. For a moment, I almost thought I spotted the shadow of a tall silhouette standing beneath the light. But only for a brief moment, as it disappeared shortly after. Most surprisingly was the subtle movement from the old lady as she mumbled something underneath her breath. It was extremely subtle, enough to make me think it was my imagination. But it's probably not my imagination. As we walked, neither one of us talked. The silence embraced us from all sides, only to be shattered by the soft and muffled sound of our steps. I continued to walk like this, leading the old lady to the familiar train station. It was only after I saw the train station that I drew a secret sigh of relief. Almost there, I'm almost there, and I can finally go back to the real world. This entire experience felt like a nightmare to me. Not only was the cult that I had been trying to investigate a lot bigger and more troublesome than I expected, but it also appeared to be capable of healing cognitive shards. There's also that architect she talked about. Who exactly is he, and what is his involvement with the mist that surrounds the islands? There were so many questions in my mind, and yet no answers. But that was fine. I understood that I was going to get my answers soon enough, and eventually, stopping by the all-too-familiar train, I opened the carriage door and entered, settling my gaze over the exit of the world. Finally, I could go back to the real world. The sense of relief that I felt was only short-lived. Staring at the old woman in front of me, I knew that it was time for me to get rid of her. But at the same time, getting rid of her would mean allowing the twisted man to roam without her control. Thankfully, I've asked the section chief to come. Perhaps he might be able to handle the situation. The only issue was whether he would come or not. I had high hopes that he would, but there was no guarantee. I can only secretly hope that he saw my message. Things would be a lot easier for me if he arrived, but I still had to do something about the old lady. She simply knew too much. From the Dreamwalker to Mile, she had seen both of them, and I couldn't afford to have her spill anything on them, especially the Dreamwalker. While back then, the Dreamwalker was still a Nightwalker. The two didn't look much different than back in the masquerade scenario. Zoe and the few others who were present were all well aware of the jester and everything that had happened. It was for that reason that I couldn't afford to take the risk. Keeping her alive was the same as killing me. She has to leave. Or at least that was what I planned on doing, but the moment we stopped and prepared for the inevitable, a faint cackling echoed from behind me. Kirk! It sounded dry, and every hair on my body rose. The air felt colder, and as I slowly raised my head, I saw the old woman smiling at me with her toothless mouth. For whatever reason, she looked unbothered by the current situation, almost finding it amusing to some extent. This made my mind scramble. What, did she figure something out? No, it doesn't matter if she figured something out. What I'm more worried about is whether she has some sort of plan. If that's the case, what do I do? My thoughts swam in all directions as I tried to figure out the situation, but by the time I started thinking, it was already too late as the old woman opened her mouth to speak again. You're wearing the same look that I once had. You are thinking of getting rid of me, right? With a sudden laugh, the old woman's wrinkles grew more pronounced as her mouth curled further. I practically felt chills run down my entire body the moment she acted like that, but at the same time, I tried my best to remain calm. Nothing good will come from panicking. I need to remain calm. I had already experienced my fair share of situations such as these. I was scared, but I was also more experienced in handling the situation. All I could do was calmly assess what was happening or whatever the old woman was planning before taking care of it. The puking and fear could be pushed for later. Let's say that I am, do you? I'm a little surprised. The old woman cut me off before I could finish speaking, her hollow eyes squinting slightly as she looked at me. I am surprised that you're not concerned at all about the cognitive shard that is in your body. Do you not care about it at all? Her brows furrowed slightly as she shook her head. No, that doesn't quite make sense. Then why, if it were anyone, they would be rejoicing, wishing to join us. Why are you different? Why are you? The old woman paused as though a sudden realization struck her. I see what it is, she cackled. You must have some sort of way to prevent the cognitive shard from completely taking over your body. I've seen people who have lost their will to live. You aren't one. You're definitely looking for the cure, and since you're not interested in mine, it must mean that. Who said that I'm not interested? The old woman took a moment to process my words. I continued. I did at first think it was a little much, but I'm interested. If I were to say yes, would you accept me? The old woman didn't speak. She looked at a complete loss. I couldn't blame her. I'd also be confused in her situation. It went against what I said before, but it wasn't like I said those words without any merit. I was indeed a little interested in whatever their cult was. I understood that this quest was probably going to be a very long one. In that case, wouldn't it be more efficient if I just went there directly? If I became a member of their cult, I could probably solve a lot of troublesome quests without needing to do much. The only issue was them forcing me to do things that I didn't want to do, illegal things too. I wasn't really keen on doing that. And it wasn't like it really mattered to me. After all, I had only said this to waste time and jumble up her thoughts, enough for the Dreamwalker to lodge its hands against her mouth. Her expression changed drastically the moment it happened, obviously caught off guard by the situation. Rumble, rumble. The surroundings shook as a result, and figures began to emerge from the shadows. their presence completely taking over the entire room as I found it hard to breathe under their presence. From their clean suits to the top hats they were wearing, I recognized the monsters in an instant, and my expression turned grim. Twisted men. As expected, there were more than 2. Looking around, I could count 6 of them in total, and my legs started to feel like jelly as a result. The old lady's eyes changed the moment they appeared, her expression turning triumphant as she looked at me. Things did indeed look extremely grim for me. I could tell that he was a few seconds away from dying. But I've observed enough to know it won't happen. And exactly as I thought such thoughts, the twisted man moved behind the dreamwalker and stood before the old lady as her eyes widened in shock. She tried to say something, but the dreamwalker blocked any noise from coming out of her mouth as she started to trash around in an attempt to escape. But it was useless. The dreamwalker wasn't going to let go. And then, crack! Her hands snapped with a sickening pop, the bones twisting in the wrong direction as a wet crunch echoed through the air. Her eyes widened, not just in pain, but in sheer disbelief, trembling as she tried to scream. Crack! Then came her leg, bending backward like it had no joint at all. Her skin turned ghostly pale, veins pulsing beneath the surface, and her eyes filled with blood, turning a deep crimson as she gasped, mouth quivering, but no words came out, only a gurgle. The dreamwalker didn't let go. It kept its hand over her mouth. With another crack, her other arm bent and cracked, producing an extremely grotesque scene as her body started to dry up. I could only stare at the scene for a certain moment, before turning around and moving towards the exit of the place. Crack! Even as I heard another crack, I didn't look back before finally entering the portal and feeling my consciousness fade. In the end, all manufactured products have their own flaws, even anomalies. Despite the situation and the fear that I was experiencing, I had been observing everything extremely carefully. After all my experiences, and understanding that the quest was merely a second-order quest, I knew that it was something that I could clear. Observation was the key to getting out of this place. And that was exactly what I did as I carefully observed the old lady before me. At first I thought she has the same class as me, she is a shepherd, with how she managed to control the twisted man, and with how she also felt familiar with the dreamwalker. These were my initial thoughts and assumptions. However, this quickly changed not long after. Especially when I saw the shock on her face at the moment that she caught sight of Mile. That was the first moment I started to doubt her decree. Could she not tell that Mile was under my control, or was the reason for her shock because of Mile? That latter seemed to be the most accurate representation of the situation, and I really thought that was the case. But then, a thought occurred to me. If she's really a shepherd, how come she can control the twisted man? Her strength was on the same level as mine. While I wasn't certain, I was more or less able to determine that she was around second order. Given that the mission was also put at second order, I became more certain of this. Then, could a second order shepherd really control something as powerful as a twisted man? I'd normally not know anything about this, but as someone who followed the same decree, I was aware that it was very unlikely. The proof of this was Mile, who was a lot stronger than I, and even now I struggled to properly control her. Even her skill was unknown to me due to the strength gap between the two of us. This was the biggest indicator to me that something was wrong, especially when the twisted man was even more powerful than Mile. How could she control them if she was so weak? That made me start to think. It made me start to think about everything that I had witnessed, and all sorts of ideas and thoughts scrambled inside my mind as I carefully observed the old lady and everything that she did. If she didn't control the twisted man without her powers, then what could she use to do that? Some sort of object, keyword. The moment the idea set in my mind, I tried all sorts of ways to get my answer, and it didn't take long for me to get it. It was on the way to the train station. It was in that split moment when the figure of the twisted man appeared within the lights. In that moment, she did something, I was sure of it. I thought it had been my imagination, but it wasn't. And that was all I needed to get the answer that I was so desperately seeking. She can control the twisted man through her voice, or some sort of chant of hers. If the twisted man needed someone's voice in order to hunt them, then it needed her voice in order to be controlled by her. The prime voice. That was why I had the Dreamwalker seal her mouth. I did that so that the twisted man would turn on her. What would happen if it could no longer hear the prime voice? I had followed the history, I was aware of their past, and I was also aware of their hatred for her. The idea was simple. The twisted men weren't stupid, they were all quite smart. In that sense, what would be the first thing they did if they were suddenly free? The answer was simple. Attack her. And the moment she turned silent, my thoughts were proven correct as they attacked her. She couldn't do anything about it. I watched as her body got shredded right in front of my very eyes. She was definitely no longer alive. I was sure of this, but I didn't linger any longer to double-check. I didn't want to take the risk of having the twisted men attack me the moment that they were done with her. This was why I immediately entered the gate and returned to the real world. Breathing in the fresh and cool air around me, I looked down at the crack that sat right beneath me. It was still squirming with corpses, and the weird rusty smell of the interior of the train was starting to hit my nostrils, but it was far better than being inside the gate. While there was no real change between the worlds, for whatever reason, the place felt extremely suffocating and stuffy. The real world was much better. I better get out of here. Looking around the place, I took a photo of the crack and sent the picture to the section chief. At the same time, I moved to a more remote location before finally sending my location to the section chief. While he still hadn't answered me, I knew that he had seen my message since he had left it on read. I glanced around, taking in the dense trees and overgrown greenery surrounding me. It was quite remote, with the nearest building being quite far. This was the perfect spot for me. I would have preferably have stayed in a hotel, but it's not like I have much of a choice considering my current situation. I don't even know who to trust in this place. That cult, or whatever they are, their influence is far greater than I previously anticipated. I was afraid that going into the city would attract unwanted attention. The only thing I could do for now was stay put and wait for the section chief to come before I briefed him on everything. Things were probably going to get quite annoying from this moment forward, but it was something that I was prepared to go through after deciding to message the section chief. But most importantly, sitting down on the grass, I took out my laptop from my bag and opened a random blank document as I began to type quietly. This whole experience has actually given me a lot of inspiration for my game. I think I finally know how to move forward with the story. It can't be too linear. It needs to keep players guessing, make them wonder what really happened, and how everything ended up this way. Psychological horror was one of the most important things that one needed to take into account when creating a game. This experience had made me learn quite a bit about this aspect. This was why I decided to write in the middle of nowhere. Inspiration was quite rare, and now that I had found it, I didn't want to get interrupted. You suddenly got inspired. Ah, yes. For your game. Yeah, it's... I froze mid-sentence, snapping my head up to meet the gaze of a figure I knew all too well. He stood above me, staring down at my laptop with a mix of curiosity and stunned disbelief. Seeing his reaction, I closed down my laptop and gave and coughed dryly. Section Chief, you're here faster than I expected. Let me just brief you on everything that happened. As I spoke in a rather hurried tone. I wanted to get this over with quickly. I really wanted to get back to work. But, for some reason, the more I spoke, the more bewildered the section chief became, glancing back and forth between me and the laptop. Eventually, he covered his mouth with one hand and shook his head, as if struggling to process what he was seeing. What? Why was he even reacting like this? All right, I get the gist of the situation. He scratched his messy hair and turned around while looking into the distance, sighing. This will be quite a mess that I have to clean up. Although the section chief did say that he had quite the mess to clean up, it took him no longer than an hour for him to come back, patting his hands as though he had done some trivial work. I raised my head and looked at him. You're done. More or less, there were a few troublesome things that I needed to take care of and check out, but I'm fine now. Are you done? We should go back. Oh. I slid my laptop back in my bag and stood up. I couldn't wait to go back to the guild. While this trip had been short, it practically took the life out of me. Pausing, I looked back at the section chief as I thought of something. What? We can just leave like that. We don't have to wait for those from the guild to come. Those from the guild? The section chief looked confused at first, but then, as if understanding the situation, he dismissively waved his hand. "Oh, that right, yeah. What does that even mean?" "Wait." Seeing his expression, my stomach flipped. "Don't tell me he forgot to call them." Thankfully, that didn't appear to be the case as he answered shortly after, his expression a little annoyed. "This place falls outside our jurisdiction, so even if I wanted to step in, I couldn't. All I can do now is quietly report it to the Guild and Bureau and wait for them to act. Not that it matters much, I've already handled the most critical parts and uncovered a few key clues I've been chasing for a while." Important clues. I was somewhat curious as to what he found out but didn't pry and remained silent. I knew that asking would probably lead to nowhere. In that sense, it was just best to remain quiet. With that being said, it's best to tell him about the cult and everything that I know about them. I think it was safe for me to say this to him. While I was going to leave Mile out of this, I could lie about a few other things in order to explain a few of the things that I knew. I believed that this was the best approach since the cult was rather massive, and it was probably going to be impossible for me to deal with them. Taking into consideration how the quests are going, I am inclined to believe that the system is trying to pit me against them. Whatever the case, I was now entangled in the situation. It made the most sense to work with the Guild and try to learn more about them. Maybe the Guild already knew something, maybe they could provide information I hadn't uncovered yet. I think we've overstayed our stay. It is time for us to go." As the section chief turned his wrist and checked his watch, he looked at me. "I can see that you seem to have a few things to say to me, but now is not the best of times. Let's go back on the private jet before we discuss the situation." "Okay, eh?" "Wait, did he just say private jet?" "Oh, judging from your expression, you don't seem to be aware of the fact that we're in possession of a private jet. Thinking about it, you could have probably have used it if you had just asked." The section chief cackled, leaving me at a complete loss. Wait, I could also use the private jet. No, although the Guild might be rich, there's no way that they can just give out a private jet to just anyone. I'm sure he's just messing with me. One look at his face at that expression, and I felt even more certain. I clicked my tongue quietly but said nothing. Regardless, we both made our way back to the airport. I was a little on edge during the trip, but with the section chief by my side, everything went smoothly. Before long, we were boarding the private jet. "It's nice, isn't it?" Taking a seat in the leather seat and feeling the warmth of the seat, I didn't know what to say. This was the first time I had ever experienced such luxury in my life. It once again reaffirmed my thoughts about getting rich. So long as my next game does well, I should be able to live much better. After everything I'd just experienced, I felt more certain than ever about my upcoming game. The mechanics were solid, and the storyline was almost ready. Now, all that was left was to integrate the story into the game itself. Once that was done, it'd be ready for launch. I'd say, give or take 2 weeks. 2 weeks of pure work, and I'll be able to launch the second game. Lost in thought, I didn't realize that the jet had already started to make its way around the runway. It was only when the jet started to speed up that I realized that it was about to depart. And as soon as that happened, the section chief turned his attention back towards me, his expression rather serious. "We're about to leave the airport. It's just the two of us right now. Tell me exactly what you found and how you managed to get yourself in this situation." Noticing the section chief's expression, I sat in silence for a brief moment before letting out a sigh. It was clear there was no need to worry about prying eyes or ears, so I began to tell him everything I knew. I explained how I'd come to this place to investigate the origins of the Twisted Man, hoping it would help shape my game. I told him about the old woman's house, the photographs I'd found, showing him in the process, and how I eventually discovered the crack near the train station. Finally, I shared my growing suspicion that the city might be under the influence of the cult, at least to some degree. I even added a little bit of extra detail that I knew about the cult from my previous exploration. It took about 20 minutes for me to tell the section chief everything, and by the time that I was done, he sat in silence with his brows furrowed. Looking at him, he didn't look surprised. Rather, I even heard him mumble things like, "So the situation has advanced to this extent." He looked to be aware of exactly what I was talking about. This didn't come off as a surprise to me. If I knew about the cult, I was sure that the Guild was also aware of them. I was just about to open my mouth to ask about them when... Ding! I received a sudden notification, causing me to stop abruptly. Blinking my eyes, I stared at the notification that appeared before me as my heart skipped a beat. The quest. I didn't even get the chance to rejoice about the notification when I suddenly received another one. Ding! I froze on the spot, my mind pausing for a moment as I stared at the second window that suddenly appeared before my very eyes. Oh! Staring at the second window, I unconsciously let out a sound. It was rather unexpected. Instead of completing one quest, I had completed two. I've struck it rich. Chain quest completed. Difficulty second order. Reward 10,000 SP plus lucky wheel. Objective discover the origin of the twisted man. Location Harmia Island. Description to deepen your game's storyline, you'll need to uncover more about the twisted man. Head to the location where it was first seen. There you might find clues about its origin and the truth behind its existence. Time limit 4 days. The quest notification came as expected. This didn't surprise me very much as I had already expected it to come. But then, ding! The second notification popped up and my thoughts blanked. Continuation quest activated. Difficulty third order. Reward 40,000 SP. Objective expose the cult and its plans. Location NA. Description the cult has now set its target on you. You must be careful not to get caught by them. Only death awaits if you get caught by them. Find a way around the situation and expose them. Time limit 2 months. Seeing the sudden appearance of the second quest notification, alongside the reward, I didn't know how to react. I had already been aware of the fact that there was a chance that this quest would complete as well, but now that it actually completed, I didn't know how to react. Especially when I saw the reward that came with the quest completion. A whopping 40,000 SP, which added to the 10,000 SP from the first quest, meant that I had made an overall of 50,000 SP. This was $500,000. How could one expect me to remain calm after taking into consideration just how much money I had made? Even the section chief, who sat next to me, appeared to notice the changes in me as he looked at me strangely. Are you okay? Yes. No, I actually wasn't. But it wasn't like I could just tell him the reason why. Taking a couple of quick and steady breaths, I managed to calm myself down before leaning against the back of the seat and closing my eyes. Okay, this is a little unexpected, but this is actually good for me. With the new SP, I can buy a lot of things, but what should I spend the SP on? My first thought fell on the shop items. With the difficulty of the quests increasing, buying an appropriate item would help me out a lot in dangerous situations. The greatest example was the most recent situation. Things would have been a lot easier for me had I gotten an item like the invisible cloak. With it, I would have been able to find all of the information that I needed without any danger. Well, there's no guarantee that the old lady wouldn't have found me, but life would have been so much easier for me. This was the first thought that crossed my mind when I saw all the SP that I suddenly received. And I really was planning on buying a new item because of it. But then I stopped myself. I was suddenly reminded of the fact that SP wasn't just used to buy items. I could use SP to buy software for my game. Thinking about my current project, I found myself opening my eyes once again. It was just unfortunate that my thoughts weren't able to make it far. Ding! Just as the previous notifications came abruptly, so did the new ones. The guild has now learned crucial and important information regarding the twisted man and the cult. Your contributions were anything but small. Unfortunately, despite the death of the old lady, the cult was still able to learn information about you and your involvement. The cult has now become even more aware of your presence, especially with Miles' presence. Thread carefully. Continuation quest activated. Difficulty 4th order. Reward 210,000 SP. Objective locate the main branch of the cult. Location NA. Description the cult and you can no longer coexist. Locate their hideout in Malavia and find out more about the architect, alongside their doctrine. Best be careful, as the cult will now actively look for you. They have eyes and ears everywhere. Time limit 6 months. Later. Staring at the new window, I didn't know how to react. It wasn't like I didn't expect it. I did in fact see it coming. But it was just that I didn't expect the quest to escalate to the Fourth Order, while at the same time needing me to locate their main branch. How in the world was I even going to find the branch? I didn't even know where to start. This sounded like a massive headache, and it probably showed as the section chief raised his brow. "Are you sure you're okay? You don't look okay." "About that." I raised my head to look at him. "I actually do feel sick. Like very sick." The journey back to Malavia Island wasn't very long. It took a lot less time than when I left. I guess these are the perks of flying with a private jet. With that being said, the moment we landed, we were escorted by a bunch of people in black suits into a small room where we were questioned before getting released. By the time we returned back to the guild, it was quite late in the night. With the section chief letting out a tired yawn, he looked at me and scratched his already messy hair. "I've yet to get a single ounce of sleep because of you, and I still need to handle quite a lot of things once I go back. I probably won't get much sleep today, 4 hours if I'm lucky." "Oh, that was about my average." "In any case, go get some rest. The guild will most likely question you tomorrow about the situation. Just answer them like you answered me, and you should be Finhuam." With another yawn, tears formed at the corner of the section chief's face as he shook his head and dismissively waved his hand at me. "All right, I guess this is my cue to leave. Just don't forget what I said. Oh, and..." Suddenly pausing, he looked at me. "Do you owe me one?" He proceeded to leave right after that. Staring at his departing back as he entered the guild, I stood still for a moment before alternating my gaze between the guild and the direction of the dorms. I was really tired as well. I also didn't get much sleep. But I don't really have much time. Thinking about the new quests and the dangers that I had gone through, I knew that every second mattered. I also got some sleep on the plane. As of right now, I had one priority, and one priority only: finishing my new game. That was why, after a few more seconds of hesitation, I sighed and headed back to the guild. Game. Mumbling to myself, I entered my office and started working. With the sudden experience, I no longer needed to worry about the writing, as I had a lot of inspiration. Everything went smoothly from that point forward. For the next 2 weeks, I focused entirely on the game. The only times I came out of the office were when I needed coffee or when I needed to go to the bathroom. I didn't even bother going out to sleep or eat. I just had Kyle send me the food over. I was like some sort of homeless freak inside of the guild, with everyone avoiding me for the subsequent days. But it didn't matter to me. The only thing that mattered to me was the game, and... Done. I was now finally done with it. Click. Blankly staring at the monitor and staring at the rendered product before me, I sat in silence without saying a single word. I was mentally exhausted, and I felt completely drained. In fact, I could hardly keep my eyes open, but staring at the interface that stood before me, all the exhaustion and pain felt worth it. Done, I'm really done. After what felt like forever, I was finally done with my second game. I had spent practically my entire 2 weeks on it, forgoing sleep and food in order to ensure that it was perfect. While I couldn't guarantee that the game wouldn't have any glitches and bugs, I was really happy with the final product. At the very least, I had been able to create what I had envisioned for the game. Unlike the first game, I was confident this time. This game, it was certainly going to create a larger splash than the first game. It's not like the first game was unsuccessful, but the overall sales are at around 30,000. I am almost certain that this can reach 6 digits in sales if everything goes well. Then again, I could be severely overestimating myself. Looking at the screen, I pressed my lips together. This won't affect the sales, right? The main interface wasn't anything amazing. It was just a simple black screen with a few smoke graphics and 3 words. Continue. New game. Options. Quit. I invested all of my time in creating the game and didn't bother with the aesthetics of it, from the game logo to the interface. Everything was rather plain. The game logo depicted a tall, slender figure in a black suit, one hand tipping its top hat in a gesture that felt like a disturbingly polite greeting. Its face was mostly obscured by the brim of the top hat, but just enough was visible to reveal a pale complexion and a long, twisted mouth that curved unnaturally at the edges. The logo was essentially a rip-off of the Twisted Man. I didn't really see the need to be creative with the logo. The Twisted Man was an anomaly that was registered within the guild database and was somewhat known to the public. I wasn't really worried about the cult targeting me because of it. Well, that and the fact that they were already targeting me. Since that was the case, I didn't hold back and just went along with it. The logo and interface might not be the best thing, but it's not like I'm selling those two things. What I'm confident in is the game. I'm confident even Kyle might get affected by it. Thinking about Kyle, how was he doing? I hadn't really been paying much attention to him or whatever was happening in the guild. I know something has been happening since there's been quite a bit of chaos, but I'm not entirely sure. Rubbing my eyes, I closed down my laptop and leaned back against the chair. Feeling the only source of light fade as the room plunged into darkness, I closed my eyes for a brief moment before finally standing up and heading for the door. Might as well check up on him. I needed a guinea pig to test out my new game. I was just about to leave the room to find my guinea pig when all of a sudden, someone knocked on the door. To talk. HM. I was a little surprised at first, but then a smile formed on my lips. Oh no. I hastily covered my mouth, trying my best not to show my smile as Rowan eventually opened the door and looked around the room. Seth. One look at his haggard face, and the deep, glaring black circles under his eyes told me he was far from doing well. The smile that was forming on my face grew even more as Rowan turned on the lights and looked in my direction. He looked at me with visible relief. You're here, I'm here to have my session. Oh, right. I turned my wrist and checked the time. It was indeed time for the two of us to have our session. Apart from eating, working on the game, and sleeping, there had been one other thing that I had been doing. And that was the private counseling session with Rowan. If it had been up to me, I would have stopped our sessions and focused entirely on the game. It wasn't like I didn't try. However, the moment I even tried to propose the idea, Rowan's face would turn completely pale, as though the entire world was crumbling before his very eyes. Seeing him like that, I felt quite a bit of pity towards him. In the end, I decided to continue the sessions. Thank God for that. I'd been searching for a guinea pig, then one just happened to appear right in front of me. What great luck. Have a seat, Rowan. I pointed towards the seat before me as I opened my laptop again and crossed my legs. Watching as he sheepishly sat in front of me, I booted up the game while making some small talk with him. You are not looking very great, having nightmares. Nightmares? No, not really. Rowan shook his head while massaging his tired eyes. I'm just overworked lately. With the new exchange members coming into the department, we've been forced to enter one gate after another. I've hardly got any time to rest. Is that so? Oh right, there was indeed that. I had been so immersed in my game development that I had completely forgotten about the exchange members. I haven't really paid much attention to the situation, but seeing how tired Rowan looks, I guess the situation isn't very good. Right, Kyle had also not been bothering me much lately, which was kind of odd. I grew a little interested. How are they doing? I'm sure it's hard for them to get adjusted to this department. The gates aren't so Monsters. Rowan cut me off mid-sentence, leaving me stunned as he covered his face with both hands. They're fucking monsters. Hey, what did he just say? Did he say monsters? It's as if they aren't bothered at all by the gates. Although we haven't been entering any big gates, they've been clearing them at record times, bulldozing their way towards clearance. Do you remember the initiation trial? Initial trial? I thought for a moment, was he referring to the Nightwalker 1? I think so, it was somewhat They all cleared it in record time, beating everyone's record by quite a large margin. The words that were about to come out of my mouth stopped the moment I heard Rowan's words, and just before I could even process them, Rowan continued. Of course, considering their strength, it is only natural that they clear the trial extremely fast. If Kyle and the others were to clear the gate at their current strength, they would pull similar times, but it's not just them. Even their first years are pulling record times. It's gotten to the point where everyone is starting to question the competency of the department. Rowan's voice grew a little more haggard as he spoke. The reason we've been working extra hard is because we've been trying to prove to them that being in this department isn't easy, but... Rowan stopped there. However, he didn't need to say anything for me to understand. I guess these exchange people are a lot more competent than I initially thought. It seemed like they were going to have tough times ahead of them. Not that it mattered much to me as I stared at my laptop and turned it in Rowan's direction.
Here, HM.
Slowly raising his head, Rowan looked at me.
What?
It's a new game that I developed. I quickly cut Rowan off, trying my best to hide my smile. This should help you get your mind off these matters. Have a go. Staring intently at Rowan, I felt my heart start to quicken. A question emerged in my mind as I stared at him. How loud was he going to scream? I licked my lips. I really hope this works. Why is he asking me to play his game? Staring at the laptop in front of him, Rowan was a little confused. However, he wasn't confused for long as he recalled that Seth's real job, that of a game developer, or at least that was what he called himself. In Rowan's mind, Seth was more of a therapist for him than a game developer. He was the only one who was capable of calming him down whenever he had trouble with sleep or had nightmares about his past. That was why Rowan forgot all about Seth's real job. But then again, he wasn't really that interested in playing Seth's game. He didn't want to sound arrogant, but he was one of the top recruits within the guild. Yes, he was still inferior to Kyle and Zoe, but he was still up there. He didn't believe for 1 second that the game could have an effect on him. He was also not in the mood for it, especially with everything that had been happening within the department. I know he's helped me out a lot, but I don't really want to fake a reaction. I'm not exactly the greatest of actors. If I fake it and he realizes it, he might just stop doing the sessions with me. But what if I don't fake it and I won't get scared? Will he get angry and kick me away? Or will he lock himself up in his office again? But what about my sessions? Rowan started to sweat. Regardless of how he tried to see things, he was in quite a disadvantaged situation. Whichever option he chose seemed to lead to a terrible outcome for himself. The only way for everything to go smoothly was to be genuinely scared, but Rowan knew he wasn't going to get scared. Just one look at the plain interface was all he needed to know about the quality of the game. Ah shit, what do? I can't do without the therapy sessions anymore. It's Rowan. Suddenly hearing his name get called out, Rowan raised his head to see Seth staring at him with his head tilted. Is there something wrong? Is the game not loading? Oh, ask the game. Yes, the game. Turning his attention back to the game, Rowan secretly swallowed. He was trying to think of all ways to reject playing it. However, lifting his head once more to stare at Seth and seeing the way that he was looking at him, Rowan could only inwardly sigh. Since I made an appointment with him, telling him that I have something coming up will feel too obvious. In the end, do I have no other choice but to play the game? Licking his lips, Rowan once again alternated his gaze between the laptop and Seth. However, the moment he looked at Seth and saw the look of anticipation on his face, Rowan felt his hand twitch. It really did seem like he cared. All right, fine. In the end, Rowan sighed once more. Regardless of how unscary the game was, he was prepared to put out the most amazing performance of his life. Reaching out for the mouse, Rowan moved the cursor towards the play button and left-clicked. Click. The game began. Swoosha, swoosha. Figures began to emerge one after another from behind a large portal. Waiting for them before the gate were several figures clad in white clothes, holding onto tablets as they stared at the emerging figures with a look of shock. In the end, they only snapped out of it when Kyle emerged. He had a complicated expression on his face as he did. Turning his attention towards the people clad in white, Kyle held onto a large bag and tossed it to them. Here, this is our haul for today. Yes. Catching onto the bag, one of the figures clad in white opened it and quickly looked through the contents. This. It didn't take long for their expression to change as they looked at Kyle and the group in shock. Not bad, right? Smiling at the researcher, Kalen emerged from behind Kyle as he stared at the bag. If I didn't count wrong, we should have been able to fetch about 30 fragments. 34 to be exact. Seralith added by the side, yawning slightly as she gave the bag a casual glance before losing interest. Leaning against her spear, she brushed her long white hair behind her head while also mumbling something to herself. Something along the lines of, "What should I have for lunch? Turkey sandwich." Staring at the two and then the bag, Leon found himself licking his lips. While the hall wasn't exactly big, considering the gate that they had just entered was a mere D rank, this was amongst the highest halls they could receive. Once a gate was cleared, they wouldn't just disappear forever after closing. Once a gate was cleared, the guild would assume authority over it, allowing them to send members back inside to gather fragments. Or in their own terms, farm them. What distinguished the differently ranked gates from one another wasn't the purity of the fragments within, they all scaled with the gate's clearance level. It wasn't the attribute either. What truly set the gates apart in rank was the haul granted upon clearing each successive trial. The higher the rank of a gate, the greater the number of fragments that could be farmed in said gate. A D-ranked gate usually produced about 20 to 30 fragments per subsequent clear. In other words, they had cleared the gate flawlessly. This one was quite a bit easier than I expected. I'd expect the fragments to be quite pure this time. The haul isn't so bad. Chiming in from the side was Sarah, who looked at the bag with sparkling eyes as they all started to move back towards the containment area. Coming directly from the collection department, Sarah specialized in the collection of fragments from gates. Her attraction towards the fragments was only natural. I can tell with just one look that the fragments are at least 60% above in purity. Fuck, Sarah enviously looked in the direction of those in the containment department. You guys have it really easy. We hardly did a thing, and we managed to get so many pure fragments. How is this department so unprofitable when it's so easy to farm fragments? About that, Kyle could only force a smile while answering her. It wasn't like collecting the fragments was hard. If he went by himself, he could probably collect the same amount. The issue was that he was too busy trying to clear the higher-ranked gates, leaving the lower-ranked gates for the less experienced people. The number of resources the guild had to spend to first clear the gate in the containment department was much higher than what it spent on one gate in the other departments. Not only that, but the deaths were much higher too. It really wasn't as easy as she thought it was. Kyle was just about to say this, but was soon cut off by Kaelin, who gave them the side-eye. Maybe the reason why they are so unprofitable is that they waste too much time on preparations. I heard that in order to join this department, one needed to be extremely brave, but... Kaelin put on a difficult face as he looked away from Kyle and entered the containment zone, filled with its numerous cubicles. As far as I see, rather than bravery, I see something else. What else do you see? Frowning, Kyle looked at Kaelin. He could feel that whatever Kaelin was trying to imply wasn't anything nice. Seeing Kyle take the bait, Kaelin's lips pulled up as he opened his mouth to speak when... Clank! A sharp smack rang out in the distance, snapping everyone's attention toward one of the doors. From behind the darkness that embraced the insides of the door, a pale figure stumbled forward, his eyes wide and quivering. He reached out a trembling hand toward the doorframe, barely able to whisper, help. But before his fingers could touch the edge, a figure materialized behind him. The figure tilted his head slightly, voice calm. Come on, you barely played the game. Keep going, I still need more data. No. Do me this favor. Rowan's face contorted, his expression twisting as the color drained from his skin. He jerked his head up, eyes locking with Kyle and the others. With sudden desperation, he reached toward them, screaming at the top of his lungs. Help me, I can't do this anymore, help me. Help me. The commotion was impossible to ignore. Rowan's frantic shouting filled the air, and the sheer panic on his face as he desperately clawed at the doorway left everyone momentarily stunned. The same was true for the exchange members as they looked at one another. What's going on? Did something serious happen? The commotion didn't just catch their attention. It drew the eyes of everyone in the area. One by one, heads turned toward the distant office, a heavy silence settling as Rowan's shouts continued to fill the space. Seeing just how big the commotion they were causing was, Seth's face started to scrunch up. The attention was too much for him. He raised both of his hands. Fines, you don't need to continue. I've gathered enough data.
Really?
Rowan fell silent almost instantly, his eyes wide with surprise as he slowly turned to face Seth. For a moment, he almost forgot about everything. However, the fear quickly clawed back into his mind as he started to stutter. Are you telling the truth? I don't have to continue anymore. From the way he was speaking, he was still clearly shaken up by the situation. Noticing this, Kyle's brows furrowed tightly as he moved towards Rowan. Is everything all right? Did something happen?
Lattice.
The moment Rowan heard Kyle's voice, he flinched instinctively, startling Kyle in the process.
Go back, go.
But as his eyes settled on Kyle, the panic in his expression gradually eased, giving way to a flicker of relief.
It's you.
Rowan covered his mouth in relief.
What's going?
This was the first time that Kyle had seen Rowan so shaken up. The two of them had dived in gates together on several occasions, and while he had seen Rowan shaken up on a few occasions, it was never to this extent. Staring at him and seeing his eyes, which still appeared to be trembling, Kyle felt that something was extremely wrong. Eventually, he turned to look at Seth. He was just standing behind Rowan with an innocent expression. He looked like shit, his hair was a mess, his clothes were a mess, and he smelled like shit. His face was also pale, and there were glaring black circles beneath his eyes. He looked to be in even worse condition than Rowan. And yet, for whatever reason, Kyle had a feeling that Seth had something to do with the situation. But that doesn't make sense. Did something go wrong with their therapy session? But last I heard, Rowan was having a really good time there. The more Kyle thought about the situation, the more confused he became. He wanted to ask more about the situation, but before he could do so, a voice cut through the surroundings. Don't mind him too much, he was just doing me a favor.
HM.
Looking up, Kyle saw that it was Seth who spoke. Yawning slightly, Seth's shoulders slumped a little as he looked at Rowan and mumbled, It's safe to say that it went well. I might need to make a few tweaks, but this is good. He then looked up towards the others, focusing on the exchange members for a brief moment before pushing Rowan out.
Okay, I have work to do.
As he pushed Rowan out, he kept his eyes on the floor.
Then, have a good day.
Clanged. He proceeded to close the door then and there, leaving everyone stunned. It took a few seconds for everyone to register what was happening. The first to snap out of it was Kalen, his expression growing a little odd. Quite the eccentric therapist. He's a therapist, right, or counselor? His words were enough to make the others snap out of it, as several turned to look at the doors with frowns. What the hell was that? Did he just close the door like that, WH? Don't mind him. Seeing how the situation was starting to escalate, Zoe promptly cut in. He's usually like this, don't take his actions seriously, he's very antisocial. Zoe turned to look at Kyle as she said so. Feeling her gaze, Kyle forced a smile.
Yes.
She wasn't wrong, Seth was indeed antisocial. No, it's more like he's introverted. Well, same thing. Whatever, Kyle wasn't really all too bothered by Seth's actions. He was already used to his behavior. In his mind, this was nothing unusual. He hated interacting with new people, and so this was in line with his character. What really set him off was Rowan, who was still breathing heavily, his face pale, and his back leaning against the wall as he tried to catch his breath. Kyle wasn't the only one who noticed Rowan's current condition. By the time Kyle noticed, almost everyone noticed as they started to focus their attention on him. Rowan, are you okay? What's going on? What happened? Why are you acting like this? Everyone who knew Rowan was quite worried when they saw him like this. Even the usually indifferent Zoe was taken aback by Rowan's behavior. Just what in the world had set him off like this? Why did he look like someone who had just seen the devil itself? Rowan.
Oh.
It was after several shouts that Rowan finally snapped out of his state as he raised his head and saw the multiple gazes fixed on him. What's going on? Why is everyone?
Rowan.
Kyle was the first to step forward, placing his hands over Rowan's shoulders to calm him down. He looked at Rowan straight in the eyes. I need you to relax for a second. You're in a state of panic. Take a couple of deep breaths. I'm trying, I'm really trying. Just listen to my words. Take a few deep breaths and calm yourself down.
But,
just follow my instructions. Seeing how serious Kyle was being, Rowan closed his mouth and proceeded to follow Kyle's instructions. He began to take a few deep breaths, allowing him to finally even out his breathing as his face returned to normal and his eyes stopped shaking. By the time a minute had passed, Rowan was back to his usual self as Kyle removed his hands from Rowan. "All right, it looks like you're good now."
I am.
With his mind now clear, Rowan was able to process the situation more calmly as he felt the gazes of everyone present more clearly. He could even feel the judgmental ones coming from the exchange members. Eventually, Rowan settled his gaze back on Kyle, who opened his mouth. "What in the world happened? Why were you acting like that?"
What happened?
Rowan blinked his eyes slowly, his mind wandering back to the events that had transpired a few moments prior. Everything began from the moment he began that game. Yes, that was where it all started. At first, Rowan didn't think too much about the game. His mind had been preoccupied with ways of trying to act so that he wouldn't offend Seth too much. This was all he thought at first when he started the game. It was a rather decent game, with decent graphics and good mechanics. Rowan thought he'd be able to clear it in no time. He really thought it was going to be an easy game. But that was when everything turned for him. Rowan didn't know when it happened, but at some point every thought slipped from his mind. All that remained was the game in front of him. It pulled at his attention like a void, leaving him utterly fixated, unable to focus on anything else. That was probably when it all started. The start of his nightmare. Unable to tear his gaze away from the game, Rowan found himself slowly getting sucked in by the game, almost as if he were the very character of the game, a weak and helpless character that could only helplessly navigate the game without any way to fight. Rowan found himself getting more and more absorbed by the game, his eyes glued on the screen and his fingers glued to the keyboard. He found both his thoughts and mind completely taken over by the game, forcing him to continue the game, guiding him towards an unknown path. Rowan could still remember the outline of the environment and the whispers. Yes, the whispers. As if reading his thoughts, the game whispered them back to him, each echo sowing seeds of doubt in his decisions. His mind began to drift, lulled into a haze, and for the briefest moment, he forgot all about the monster that lurked within. He let his guard down.
Hey, Ava.
Rowan covered his mouth, his hand shaking alongside his body as he slowly raised his head to look at Kyle, and then the others. His previously calm expression once again shattered, and in its place was a clear look of panic. "What, Rowan, what's going on? Why are you acting like this? Why? Don't do it." Rowan grabbed onto Kyle's arm, his eyes bloodshot as his mouth trembled.
What?
Kyle stopped, his expression turning as Rowan put more force in his grip, while he looked towards the others. Whatever you do, don't agree to play his game, ever. Thanks for watching. Please sub and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story.